In this video, we'll be talking about the importance of documentation that's using comments in our coding and proper variable names, and also talking about constants. To illustrate these topics, we're going to be doing a cool little scrolling 1 and 0 thing, similar to if you've seen the movie The Matrix, what kind of scrolling ones and zeros that they use in that. We're going to do kind of a code with me type thing, and we're going to make that streaming ones and zeros that you just saw, and through coding that, there's a few things that I want to introduce you to. All right, so we'll start by importing a random, and we also need sys, and we also need time. Sys is you've used random and time before. Sys you haven't, but that's fine. Before we do that though, I want to put some things up here, okay? We'll say it's programmed by Mr. Wu, and we'll say that it is streaming ones and zeros, and we'll put today's or the date, which we'll just say winter 2022, and then we'll put a brief description of what this program will do. Okay, this program will create a neat illusion of ones and. Okay, I'm gonna move to a new line. It's best not to let the lines get too long. Usually the standard is 80 characters. But yeah, just so that it won't go off the screen, kind of thing. A neat illusion of ones and zeros that are streaming down the page, something like that. Okay, so now that we've got this out of the way, we know who it was done by and when it was done and what it will kind of do. Then we can start with our code. Okay, so we're importing those things. And then we're going to have what's called some constants. So min stream length equals 6, max stream length equals, say, 14, pause equals 0.01, and stream chars equals, and it's going to be a list of 0 and 1, density equals 0.05, and width equals 80. So you notice that I'm doing all caps here. That's because these are what's called constants. Let's say constants. So constants are kind of like variables, except they're things that are not meant to change while the program is running. So often when we're programming, you'll have kind of these parameters, or I don't know, like the force of gravity, whatever it is, and those things don't change. But we'll have other things that will change while the program is running, and those are called variables. So with the constants, the way that we denote constants is with all capital letters. In other languages, not Python, these things actually cannot be changed. Here in Python, they can be changed, but by putting them in all caps, we're saying that we don't want them to change. And you'll notice that I'm putting actual meaningful kind of words in here, so that we do know that, okay, what is this? Density, 0.5. And you'll notice that for multiple words, so often with variable names or constant names, you need to have 2 or 3 words to make it like a meaningful thing. And so we would separate those by underscores, okay? Okay, so let's move on, and we'll have columns equals, okay, so in this case, my columns is going to change throughout the program's running, and so I made it a variable instead of a constant, which essentially is the same thing, but I just denote that by making it lowercase. Okay, so if you were doing variable names, you might want to say columns list. This would be like the correct way of doing like a 2-word variable name. In this case, I think it's not necessary to say that, so we'll just simplify and just say columns. Okay, and so here I have a for loop that is going to set up the columns, and basically depending on how many columns there are, so range width as we know is 80, it's going to append 0. So it's going to be in this list of columns, it's going to be 80 zeros. Okay, so I'm putting together a while true loop, so it's going to run continuously, and inside we're doing for I in range width, so going every column, what is going to happen. So the first thing in the column, we're going to see if it is a 0. As we recall, they all start out as 0. Okay, so if it is a 0, we're going to get random.random. So if you'll recall, random.random is a number between 0 and 1, so a decimal number between 0 and 1. So if this number that is got by random.random is less than or equal to density is 0.05 currently, then we'll do this. We're going to set columns I to a random integer, random.randint, between min stream length and max stream length, so between 6 and 14. Okay, so what is this really doing? This is, I guess you can say, kind of initializing a new stream. So we'll just write a comment to say that. Initializing a new stream. Okay, so comments start with a pound sign or a hashtag. And so they will, there's something that Python interpreter will ignore. Therefore, humans looking at this to say, what's going on here? Okay, so they're to help anyone who's reading this code after you write it, to help that person understand what's happening. So who could that be? Well, that could be yourself if you come back to this like a few months from now and you're like, oh, what the heck was I doing? I totally forgot. These comments will help. They might be for, someone else looking at your code. So in your case, that will mainly be myself. I'm the teacher marking it, and I want to know what's going on. But if you're working on a project in industry or whatever, you'll often have, usually you'll have teammates, people who are looking at your code. Maybe you quit that job, but someone else is maintaining that code. And so there's a lot of people who may be looking at your code, and they need to understand what's happening. So with the code, okay, so when do we leave comments? So you'll notice that, okay, so generally, you would put a comment at the beginning of like a logical part, like a part, or often at the beginning of a loop, or beginning a function is another place where you would put comments. Basically the beginning of sections, and it explains what's going on in that section. You would assume that whoever's reading the comments knows how to code, so you wouldn't say this is a variable, but you would say like looking at this, it's hard to figure out, okay, what is really going on here. If someone who knows how to code can't figure out at a glance what's happening, that's a good place for a comment. So in this case, I have the beginning, I have a loop here, but this loop is pretty obvious what's happening. I'm just making a loop of zeros, or a list of zeros. And so there's no need to comment this loop because it's so simple. Okay, while true, do I need to comment that? I could, but it's not super necessary because again, it's pretty obvious what's happening. Okay, but here, this is, I would say, not obvious. Good place for a comment. Okay, let's continue. Okay, right here. Okay, so here was in the case where there was a 0, and here is the case where it's basically not 0. Okay, so if it is 0, I'm going to initialize a new stream, potentially, not always, just sometimes, depending on if this one is true or not. If it's not 0, then there's already a stream going on. And if there's a stream going on, I'm going to print either a 1 or a 0. Okay, so random.choice stream chars. I think I made a mistake here. This bracket should be after stream chars because it's random.choice of stream chars. And then I'm printing this end. This end equals quotation mark means usually at the end of a print, it goes to the next line automatically. This will tell it not to go to the next line automatically. Okay, and then so I printed my 0 or 1, and then whatever number that is, remember it's somewhere between 6 and 14, I would reduce that by 1. And so every time we do a new row, it'll reduce by 1 more. Okay, so is that immediately obvious? Oops, that should be there. Is that immediately obvious? I would say again, not quite obvious, so I am going to leave a comment here that just says, prints a 0 or a 1, then decrements the number. All right, and then else. Print, oops, there. Okay, so basically for this one, if I'm not printing a number, then I'm printing a space. That's pretty obvious, I would say. I'm not going to leave a comment here. Alright, and then all I have to do now is at the end of that line of columns, just print a blank line. So that's what that is. And then we'll flush. And then pause for 1 second. Okay, and then we can run it. And look at that, we have our stream. Okay. Now I could change the values up here. So say I wanted the streams to be, so if you look at this stream, you can see that it's, several numbers here. This one is like just 3, okay, and so on. I could change that. So if I wanted to make the stream shorter, I would say min stream length is say 2, max is say 5. Okay, let's run that. And so now, each stream, stop it. Each stream, so that one's 4, that's 2, right, that's 2. So each stream is shorter. I could, what else? You could change the characters. I could say, I don't know, P's and Q's or something, whatever I want. Run that, and all of a sudden it's P's and Q's, right? And so these values are going to change the way it looks. All right, so we've talked about comments. So where to leave comments. At the beginning, we leave some comments, and then in the middle, when we have a new section that is not immediately obvious, we will leave comments. We've talked about constants, so there's my constants, and we've talked about variable names and how you should be doing the variable name. So from now on, from all assignments from this one forward, I will be expecting good commenting, proper variable names, constants where you need them. All right, that's it for this video.